If someone's illegally redacting names from these files, what kind of trouble can they get into? Could they receive jail time over that? I mean, what does that punishment look like?
I'm not entirely sure what the penalties are in the law, but I will tell you that because included in the redactions, alongside that, you have several very serious files that have deeply serious accusations from a 13-year-old against Donald Trump himself. And until today, those files weren't even available and weren't released in the file release that was required by the law. So that they have been now, and it's going to be incredibly important to try to follow up with the obviously now no longer a minor individual, to get to the bottom of credibility and the possibility that Donald Trump committed the crime that she accused him of.
I hear you when you say you want to just describe who these people are, not name their names, but are they household names? Would people know who these people are?
They are people who have been named in the news in the past. Again, one is a hedge fund billionaire and who flew on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, who spent time with him on his island, and the other is a private investigator who was accused of removing documents and items from Jeffrey Epstein's home, ostensibly, at least allegedly, to help him hide his crimes.
You and I have talked before about that 2008 sweetheart deal that Jeffrey Epstein got. And just to remind our viewers, Alex Acosta, at the time, he was serving as U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. He cut a deal with Jeffrey Epstein that allowed him to dodge serious federal charges. The deal also granted him federal immunity, along with 4 other women who were named as accomplices. And arguably, one of the most controversial parts of this deal, it also granted federal immunity to any potential co-conspirators. What did you find out about this deal when reviewing the unredacted files?
Well, Alex Acosta's name himself was redacted in those files. I saw numerous instances in which he and his U.S. attorneys that worked on the case, their names were redacted. There were co-conspirators that were named in the sweetheart deal whose names were also redacted, so not victims but co-conspirators. And there was a lot of chatter and discussion and emails back and forth. If the purpose of the law that required the release of all the files with only the names of victims redacted was so that we could have full transparency and get to the bottom of what happened and examine this sweetheart deal. And I have legislation, as you know, and we've talked about it, the Courtney Wild legislation, that would make sure that the Crime Victims' Rights Act fully applies in cases where you would prohibit sweetheart deals from preventing victims, prohibit sweetheart deals and ensure that victims have the ability to go to court and know about the proposed plea deal and be able to object to it like crime victims are able to under the Crime Victims' Rights Act. That was not afforded to these victims. They never knew that this sweetheart deal was cut and that he was going to get a slap on the wrist. And they've been fighting ever since, and I continue to fight alongside them to make sure that that kind of justice can happen.
You told me the last time that we spoke that the DOJ was making this process really restrictive. It was very clunky. You only had 4 or so computers to look at these files on. Was that the case?
Yes, you have to go all the way down to a Department of Justice building, up several floors to a small room. You're escorted by staff. There are only 4 computer terminals, so only 4 members can review those files at a time. You have to make an appointment. There's limited period of time that you're able to be at the computer. The system itself has a lot of keystrokes that you have to go through to be able to unredact the name. And it actually kicks. It didn't happen to me, but several colleagues of mine who were there got kicked out of the system or having computer glitchy problems. So it's a preposterous, outrageous process that they've established that the law doesn't allow. The files should just be available, searchable. There is a searchable database, but there is so much darkened, including the content of emails that shouldn't be darkened either. There were instances where I was searching for specific documents and found emails when not only the names that should not have been redacted were darkened, but I could not unredact the names or the content of the email that I was looking for, that I was trying to read. And I asked why, and they said they would, take it back, take the document number back and try to get me the information. Hopefully they'll follow up, but I had other colleagues tell me that had happened to them as they've been searching, and the DOJ never gets back to them.
The word in this conversation that's come up a few times is cover-up. That came up in our last conversation as well. You're saying this runs up all the way to Attorney General Pam Bondi. What question would you ask her if she was sitting across from you right now?
Well, she's going to be sitting across from my colleagues on the Oversight Committee, where a bipartisan vote to subpoena her was adopted by the committee, rightfully so. The questions that I would ask her include, I want to know the details of how this sweetheart deal was decided upon. The names should be unredacted as to who was responsible for them, the timeline, and how it is that sweetheart deal that resulted in a slap on the wrist for Jeffrey Epstein was allowed. There were some very concerning exchanges that I saw with redacted names that I was able to unredact that had individuals involved in the discussions really cruelly speaking about the victims. So this whole thing was a rotting pile of sewer trash, and Pam Bondi, who is now the head of the DOJ, needs to answer for why she is violating the law and has been obfuscating the ability to be able to get to the bottom of questions like that.